Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the May 2nd regular meeting of Council. I'd like to first recognize that we are gathered on the traditional territory, the Snuneymuxw First Nation. Our clerk tonight will be Ms. Sheila Gurry. Tonight's regular meeting of Council will be held in accordance with the Community Charter and Council Procedure Bylaw 2018, number 7272. The question period sign-up sheet is on the table by the double doors to my left for agenda items only. If during the meeting any member of the gallery has a question regarding an agenda item, please write down your name and the agenda item on the sheet. As members have been granted the authority to join meetings electronically, I want to welcome the two members of Council, Councillors Gesselbrock and Turley, who are joining us electronically tonight. And the first item on the agenda is the introduction of late items. Ms. Gurry, and we have one.
Yes, we do. Thank you, Your Worship. Agenda item 12D, Townsite Road Chinese Cemetery Gateway and Pagoda. We're adding a PowerPoint presentation from Chris Schulberg, Community Heritage Planner. And that's it, Your Worship.
Thank you very much. Motion for the adoption of the agenda is amended. Moved by Councillor Bonner, seconded by Councillor Thorpe. All those in favour? Any opposed? None. We have no minutes to adopt. And in the Mayor's report, forgive me, but there are a number of items. Things have been a little busy just in terms of the city reporting. Nanaimo is in the middle of celebrating 2022 Youth Week, May 1st to 7th. Activities are planned from May 1st to May 7th with all with the intent of celebrating youth in Nanaimo. Highlights include youth toonie skates, a hike to Sugarloaf Mountain, a free swim at Nanaimo Aquatic Centre, and a special May the 4th Be With You Star Wars skate at the Nanaimo Ice Centre. And a full schedule of those events can be found on the capital YOU Youth Nanaimo Facebook page and on the City of Nanaimo website, www.nanaimo.ca. The City of Nanaimo has happily established a new tourism body to attract visitors. Officially incorporated and ready to launch with a first board meeting in mid-May, the Tourism Nanaimo Society, known generally as Tourism Nanaimo, is a non-profit marketing and management organization that works with industry stakeholders, governments, and others to develop and market Nanaimo as a destination for visitors. It will be led by a board of directors comprised of 15 voting directors representing various key government and public sector stakeholders and industry representatives. It's now officially incorporated with an inaugural meeting set, as I mentioned earlier, for mid-May. And the City of Nanaimo provided Tourism Nanaimo with $711,000 in funding this year. Funding is ongoing and will be supplemented with grants from other government agencies. And working closely with the Nanaimo Hospitality Association, Tourism Nanaimo will help market the city as a destination for meetings, conventions, and sport tourism. And as some folks who were paying attention to the previous meeting will know, it does represent about a 10% contribution to the city's economy. Nanaimo has also approved a policy for our neighborhood associations at the April 25th, 2022 meeting. This council adopted a neighborhood association supports policy along with a $10,000 annual neighborhood grant program which begins in 2023. An initial review of neighborhood associations began in February 2020 where council was interested in the organizational status of various neighborhood associations and the city's relationship with these groups. The discussions led to gathering input from existing associations, reviewing other municipalities' engagement models, and collecting feedback through a community survey. After thorough analysis and consultation, a policy was created establishing organizational criteria and other identifying ways to support associations, including funding opportunities. I certainly encourage, as this rolls out, every citizen in Nanaimo, regardless of where they live, to participate in their neighborhood associations. It not only gives voice to their concerns, it builds community, which is important in a world where we're all accused of living isolated lives, and particularly after 2 years of COVID, it's probably a good thing to get to know your neighbors. In addition, this is Emergency Preparedness Week, May 1st to May 7th. Being prepared is important and something the whole family can do. As Emergency Preparedness Week approaches, the City of Nanaimo is encouraging residents to prepare for an emergency by making a kit, drafting up a plan, and signing up for the city's Voyant Alert emergency notification system. I encourage everyone to do that. It is a very handy app. I don't pretend to be the technical expert, but everybody knows somebody, and if not, just grab some random 12-year-old off the street, Because all joking aside, having access to that system may indeed literally save your life at some point. In addition, we're kicking off spring with a family fishing day and return of concerts in the park. As some of you may know, the city invites you to a family fishing day at Collery Dam Park on Saturday, May the 7th from 10 to 2. In addition, the kickoff performance of Concerts in the Park series will take place as well from 12:30 to 1:30. All of this information is available on the events page on the city's website, www.nanaimo.ca. And these programs run through with the Fidelium and Folk Band and Collery Dam Park, all the way through to August 23rd with Shika, which is a traditional Japanese South Asian Western folk indie in Neck Point Park. And finally, on a somber note, in keeping with this council's concern for the history of this community, tomorrow, May the 3rd, will mark the 135th anniversary of the dreadful explosion at Number 1 Mine. Not far from where the current cruise ship terminal is, the mine exploded after gas or dust was ignited. It killed 150 men. Only 7 survived the explosion, all of them working in the mine's engine room. The Esplanade Mine was a maze of tunnels that extended under the harbor's ocean floor to Saskatchewan, formerly known as Newcastle Island and Protection Island. It was the first explosion at 5:55 p.m. was 260 meters below sea level in what was known as the diagonal shaft in the city's largest mine, and was the result of a poorly placed charge that ignited a pocket of coal bed gas released from a previous charge just minutes before. To understand the impact that it had on this city in its youthful days, Nanaimo was home to approximately 2,000 people. 46 women lost their husbands, 126 children lost their fathers. The mine itself saw the deaths of 25% of its employees. 150 people in a city of 2,000, you don't have to be too clever to figure out the math. That is 7.5% of the total population in one disaster. And it's why that, although I wasn't able to attend myself, that I want to honor those in our community who came out on the day of mourning on April the 28th to participate in a ceremony to recognize all workers who've been injured or killed on the job, and to recognize what it means in a community, and to, if you will, reaffirm the commitment, as we do through WorkSafe BC and as individuals in workplaces, to ensure that nobody goes to a workplace and is injured there or killed or dies on the job. Thank you for listening. We have no items to rise and report tonight, Ms. Gurry. We have no presentations. We have no committee minutes. We have no consent items. We have no delegations unrelated to agenda items, much in contrast to last week. We do have reports, however, and the first is Ms. Mercer, who usually has to stay right to the bitter end, but as I reminded everyone earlier tonight, is the person who signs the paycheck, so to speak. So the first report is the 2022-2026 Financial Plan Amendment Bylaw. Ms. Mercer, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. So staff have been busy making updates to the provisional budget that Council adopted back on December 20th. We've made changes as more current information has become available, as well as anything that Council has wished to add during the last 4 months. And the most recent change came at the April 20th Finance and Audit Committee meeting with the addition of the Downtown Nanaimo security review recommendations. And the bulk of those were, the bulk of that cost was wages and benefits for 2022. So based on all of the changes, the city has a 6% tax increase for 2022. So that's 1% for asset management and 5% for general cost increases. So for a typical house, the market value of a Class 1 residential property increased by 30.7% in 2022. So with this increase, the average value of residential property is the assessed value, the average assessed value is $718,471, and that equates to the city property tax portion of $2,456 for the year, and that's an increase of $139 over 2021. And as I mentioned previously in previous presentations, the city has to have an adopted financial plan by law by May 15th of each year. So we're here asking for council to give first 3 readings to the 2022-2026 financial plan amendment by law. I'd be happy to answer any questions, as I haven't gone through all of the budget drivers. We've kind of gone over those in previous meetings, but if anybody has any questions, I can answer them.
Councillor Himmons.
Thank you, Your Worship. No questions, but I'd like to move the recommendation.
Your
Thank
Worship,
you very much, but we do have to do it motion after motion.
we have to read the bylaw out.
So it's the motion number 1. If you, does it need to be read out, Ms. Gurry? Yes, please.
Yes.
Councillor Himmons.
Do you want to do it?
We're going to give the privilege to the acting mayor. Thank you. Just hang on. It should be.
Okay. That financial plan bylaw 2022 number 7337.01 to amend the 2022-2026 financial plan pass first reading.
Seconded, Councillor Himmons. All those in favor? Any opposed? Councillor Turley's opposed. Motion carries. Councillor Martman.
That financial plan bylaw 2022 number 7337.01 pass second reading.
Seconded, Councillor Himmons. Discussion, Councillor Thorpe.
Briefly, Your Worship, if I may, through you, just to comment that I will support this. I know that, as we say every year at this time, nobody likes to pay taxes, but the taxes are used to provide services to the citizens of our city. And I think this council has tried its best to be responsible with taxpayer money. We've made some hard decisions and tough choices, but I feel that this financial plan and this budget is quite defensible. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Thorpe, and I second your comments and would remind folks that this includes, I'll get to Councillor Turley. Thank you, Councillor Armstrong. I would remind folks this includes monies for security in our community, which at some point in the future, when the province has acted and the feds have stepped up to the plate, will hopefully mean we won't need to be spending that money. It's not a large component of the budget overall, but it is nevertheless $2.5 million, which is a significant expenditure which could otherwise go for other things if we weren't in the circumstances in which we find ourselves. But in the last few days, as we've all had reports of further incidents involving assaults on people and the disappearance of property and the taking of property, this council made, I think, the responsible decision on behalf of the citizens in Nanaimo. Councillor Turley, unless someone else steps forward, you get the last word before we vote.
Thank you. Thank you, Your Worship. I just want to say that the bulk of the items in the budget I support. However, there are enough in there that I struggled with that I know I'm probably the only one that's voting against it, but there are some things in the budget that I think really I've spoken about previously that I think we should be putting off for future dates, given the size of the increase. But that's just the way it is. I know I'll be outvoted. And I think my record is I've always voted against the report when it came down at the end anyway. So I quite enjoy being the one negative vote. Thank you.
Councillor Turley, I say this with love and affection for the person I'm about to name, who was the longest serving councillor in the history of the city of Nanaimo, a good friend. Well, he may not think I'm much of a friend anymore. Councillor Thorpe was just thought I was, I haven't forgotten Lloyd Sherry's name, but I was reluctant to speak it lest he might take it in the wrong vein. But Councillor Sherry, I believe, was notorious for voting against all the other members of council, so to speak, on various issues. And much to his credit, the voters rewarded him year after year after year. So there's hope, Councillor Turley, there's hope. All those in favor? Any opposed? Councillor Turley. Councillor Martman, please.
That financial plan bylaw 2022, number 7337.01, passed third reading.
Seconded Councillor Bonner. All those in favor? Any opposed? Councillor Turley opposed. Motion carries. Thank you very much.
And just to clarify, Your Worship, it's financial plan amendment bylaw, just so
Yes.
that's clear for the record. Thank you.
Did I read the wrong?
Thank you.
Thank you.
And the next item is the 2022 property tax rates bylaw. Ms. Mercer, once again.
Thank you, Your Worship. So based on the amounts of revenue needed from taxation in the 2022 to 2026 financial plan, staff have calculated the 2022 tax rates. So the bylaw before you outlines the property tax rates for each property class for the City of Nanaimo, the Regional District of Nanaimo, and the Nanaimo Regional Hospital District. And I've already outlined that in the previous report that the average increase for a typical house is $139 over last year. And again, tonight we're looking for council to give first three readings to the 2022 property tax bylaw.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Seeing none, Councillor Martman, please.
And just before I speak, I did notice with the change in the with the tax rate, it went down. So even though you may have had a house that went up in assessment almost 200,000 more, your taxes are only increasing that 100 and so. So I think many people were worried about the assessments were going to increase their taxes astoundingly, but it ended up working out well because it lowered the tax rate. Having said that, move that property tax rates bylaw 2022 number 7345, a bylaw to set the property tax rates for 2022 past first reading.
Seconded Councillor Hemmens. All those in favor? Any opposed? Councillor Turley. Councillor Martman, please.
Move that property tax rates bylaw 2022 number 7345 past second reading.
Seconded Councillor Thorpe. Any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? Councillor Turley. Motion carries. Councillor Martman.
Move that property tax rates bylaw 2022 number 7345 past third reading.
Seconded Councillor Bonner. All those in favor? Any opposed? Councillor Turley. Motion carries. Thank you. The next is item 12C, Nanaimo Systems Planning Organization Society Charter. Mr. Corson, good evening, welcome.
Good evening, Your Worship. Thanks. Good evening, Council. Pleased to be here to discuss the proposed Nanaimo Systems Planning Organization Society, as we're calling it, and we're seeking Council's direction to approve the charter document, and that's going to enable us to take the next steps to establish the society, appoint a board, and move forward with hiring an executive director. The need for the Systems Planning Organization emerged from Council's Health and Housing Action Plan that was completed in 2021, and that was based on 2 years of work by the Health and Housing Action Plan. It was led by Councillor Hemmens and Councillor Bonner. It had large support from Island Health and our service providers, federal agencies. It's a real combined effort to try to identify how we could tackle the challenges of homelessness. The plan recommends that we can actually transform the existing system we have by looking at a couple different ways of looking at gaps and identifying targets and improving coordination between the existing service providers. So the plan itself talks about a systems approach to dealing with homelessness. In the middle is what's called coordinated access, and that helps individuals navigate the existing system so that they can go through the system on their own or with support. And then on the right side of that, we have a lot of the areas that the Systems Planning Organization can help with, and that's helping with investment, policy coordination, service provider coordination, and looking at options for support. So through the council set up what was called a transition team, and that included Councillor Bonner and Councillor Hemmons, Marina White and Emmy Manson from Snuneymuxw First Nation, Kim Smythe from the Chamber, and John McCormick as an industry rep from the nonprofit sector. And that transition team was set up to develop a charter document that would provide a framework for how we could, what this systems planning organization would look like, kind of the role it would play, and how it would be governed. And that work took place in the spring and summer of 2021. We presented a draft charter to council last fall, and at that time, council asked us to go out with some further refinement to talk to industry, and we worked with the Nanaimo Homeless Coalition. We had at least 4 meetings with them to work through the document. And so we're back here tonight with the revised document for your consideration. So I'm just going to quickly take you through the high-level pieces of the charter itself so you get an understanding of what's in it. So the purpose of the SPO is to conduct research, collect data, provide education information to help coordinate action by the nonprofit groups and other government agencies. So whether that's Snuneymuxw, the city, the province, Highland Health. The vision is that all people, regardless of their background, situation, or past experience, can access a full spectrum of health and housing services. This is about a coordinated response and making homelessness a rare, brief event. The mandate itself is that, I won't read it to you, but is that there's very much transparent leadership and that we have a coordinated systems, which goes back to kind of the overall goal that was set out in the Health and Housing Action Plan. In terms of governance, based on the discussions we had around the table with the transition team, the idea is that the SPO, the Systems Planning Organization, is a society and it's a non-aligned agency. So while the city's funding it, it's not actually a city agency. It has a board with 9 members on it, with representation from the city and Snuneymuxw, so there's 1 vote each. And then individuals who either work in the current housing sector, the health sector, or shelter providers, 3 of those total people would be on the board. Then there's people who have governance experience dealing with health and housing, and that's 3 votes. And then there's a reciprocal vote with the Nanaimo Prosperity Corporation, because we have, on the Prosperity Corporation, we have someone from the nonprofit world on that board. The initial board will be appointed by the transition team. So following, if council were to approve this evening, we will be advertising for those positions, and the transition team will select those individuals. In terms of funding, council has already set aside just under $500,000 a year for the SPO for the next 5 years, starting in this year in 2022. And that aligns with what was in the Health and Housing Action Plan. The Health and Housing Action Plan recommends that funding be increased as it goes forward, but certainly council's made a sizable contribution. There's hopes from the transition team that other funding can be achieved from grants and from other levels of government as we go forward. In terms of board members, the majority of the board members would be serving without remuneration, but we did recognize that in the spirit of equity and inclusion, that some board members who might not be as well off would be able to provide an honorarium if that would encourage more diversity on the board. So as we're looking at board positions, we want to make sure that financial ability is not one of the factors that eliminates people. In terms of operations, the idea is the SPO is its own nonprofit agency. It looks after its own operational needs. It has its own bookkeeper, accounting, gets advice for human resources, etc. And the Health and Housing Action Plan recommended that it could potentially initially incubate with another nonprofit, or it could set up on its own and look after its own operations. The Systems Planning Organization itself would hire an executive director, like you would in other nonprofits, like we've seen in tourism or the Prosperity Corp. and they oversee the daily operations of the organization. And the board provides a governance perspective and looks after the higher level aspects of the nonprofit. We've included that in 2026, there'd be a review of the SPO. So this is before council's funding runs out, to review the organization to make sure it's meeting its goals, and if need be, changes can be made or tweaks. And council can consider if they want to continue or if they want to increase funding at that time. So in terms of next steps, if council were to approve this evening, I'll have the city solicitor work on the formal constitution and bylaws. We'll get that going right away. The transition team will work to fill the director positions, and we'll start working on the policies and procedures, which will help provide some further governance on the organization. That's all I have this evening for your worship. Happy to answer questions.
Thank you very much. And before I go to Councillor Armstrong, I just want to thank all of staff, including yourself and the many others, and Councillors Hemmens and Bonner, and all those who participated in the work of the Health and Housing Task Force, and all those who have continued to provide work to the Nanaimo Systems Planning Organization and the transition team along the way. It's very important work, and I'm certainly hopeful that it's part of the reason the provincial government is moving to coordinate, I hope, in a positive way, the various efforts, organizations that they control or fund, both directly and indirectly, so that we may actually see some genuine improvement in the lives of our citizens here in Nanaimo in particular, but the citizens of the province in general. So, Councillor Armstrong, please.
Thank you. This goes in regards to honorarium as well as expenses. Who will determine that? Is that going to be through a council motion, or is that going to be done through the executive director of the society?
Through the chair to Councillor Armstrong. So that'll be a policy that the board will adopt. So as we're developing those policies, that will be included in there.
So will that come back to council? Like, could they get more dollars than what our city staff get for remuneration for, expenses for dinners, mileage, all that stuff, or will it follow set specific guidelines set by the city or the province?
Yeah, so thank you, through the chair to Councillor Armstrong. So the ones that we've established, that we're in the process of establishing for the Prosperity Corp and for tourism, are in line with city expenses.
So all of these will have the exact same dollars, the same honorarium, so there won't be different conflicting stuff between committees?
Yeah, so through your worship to Councillor Armstrong, there is no honorariums for the Prosperity Corp or for tourism, but there was a strong belief that for the systems planning organization, if you really wanted to select people with lived experience or people who are maybe on the margins of society, it'd be advantageous to offer them an honorarium to attend. Otherwise, they might not be able to come to it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Martman, unless I don't see any, pardon me, Councillor Hemmens.
Thank you. I was just going to move the recommendations.
And we don't have to read this one out. Councillor Bonner seconds. I'm not seeing any questions. All those, Councillor Hemmens, do you wish to speak to it?
If I
Not
may.
surprisingly, I think it's appropriate.
Yeah, if I may, I'll be very brief, and I think we've all, you've all heard me speak about this. I'd just like to express my gratitude to everyone who's worked on it. It really has been since the beginning of our term. This investment isn't unlike the investment we're making in economic development, and I would just ask that everyone provide the same amount of space to allow that organization to get its legs under it before we start believing it can, give us the sun, the moon, and the stars. So we want to manage expectations, and really, in my experience, a lot of effort, a lot of hands, a lot of heart has gone into the development of this, and I think it's something that offers us an interesting and hopeful path forward in a very, very sticky issue. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bonner, and then Councillor Gesselbrock, and then Councillor Turley.
Thank you, Worship. I don't have any questions. I asked them many over the many months that we've been working on this together. And I just wanted to also thank all the participants in the Health and Housing Task Force, as well as the transition group that worked through this, including the onerous amount of work that staff has done to move this project along. I truly believe that this is groundbreaking work that we're doing here. Very few places in Canada have these types of organizations, and I believe that once again, Nanaimo is sort of leading the pack, and as we've done on many things, including donut model economy and things along those lines. And I hope and believe that it will be successful. And I know that the people that I talk to on the streets and with the agencies are looking forward to this moving forward. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Gesselbrock, then Councillor Turley, then Councillor Martman.
Thanks, Your Worship. I'm really happy to see that this organization is being formalized and will be going ahead. You know, we are facing quite a crisis with homelessness, and we need all the firepower that we can get. And so I'm really hoping and wishing this organization well to provide, you know, the additional coordination and advocacy and data collection and guidance to coordinate, you know, what we can do on our community and to deal with what we're facing. And so thanks for all the efforts put in place. I think that, you know, going forward, I'm looking forward to hearing some of the recommendations that this organization and, you know, for additional capacity building that we can do on our end at the city as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Turley.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Mr. Corson, I would assume. I was asked by a citizen this evening about this item, and I realize that I doubt that it's going to be a sizable amount of money, but I just want to confirm that the honorariums that are potentially planned would come out of the existing budget and not be in addition to.
Thank you, thank you, Councillor Turley. Through Your Worship to Councillor Turley. Yeah, so this would be part of the existing budget of the $480,000. And again, the honorarium would only be if the transition team selects somebody who's in a financial need to have that. So if you're an existing executive director or someone who's a retired board member from somewhere else, you're likely ineligible for that honorarium.
Thank you.
Councillor Martman.
Thank you. And through you, Your Worship, I'm just wondering, I'm thinking the icing on the cake would be if we can house the SPO, MPC, and Tourism Nanaimo all together so that it's not only for governance, but it's also for building those relationships, because to me, this ties right into economic development as well.
Thank you, Councillor Martman. I'm not going to ask Mr. Corson to answer that if he doesn't feel like it, and if he can, he's welcome to, but it may prove challenging, I'm sure.
No, thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, no, so thank you, Councillor Martman. And that's something we have been exploring, is the idea of a shared office space. So we've been looking at that for tourism and for economic development with the Chamber. I think once the board is established, we can certainly have that conversation. So it makes a lot of sense to share resources.
Yeah, thank you.
Seeing no further questions or comments, all those in favor? Any opposed? None? Carries unanimously. Thank you very much, Mr. Corson. The next is the Townsite Road Chinese Cemetery Gateway and Pagoda. Mr. Sims and Mr. Scholberg, good evening.
Thank you, Your Worship. Appreciate the opportunity to be here. This report is really a disclosure to Council and the public, of course, that as part of the carry forwards from 2021 into 2022, we added a project. So this is a new project, the rehabilitation of the Townsite Cemetery Pagodas. It's a change, it represents a change to the provisional budget, and so it's a specific disclosure. Mr. Scholberg we just thought this would be a really good opportunity to refresh the public on the heritage treasure that this particular Chinese cemetery and the features therein offer to the community. And as part of the work, we reached out to Dr. Lim at VIU and sort of got into quite a discussion on which members of the Chinese community could participate and provide some input. And so we reached out to the Multicultural Center as well, and and met with a number of individuals from the community. So I'll ask Mr. Schulberg to give a brief overview of the history of the cemetery, and I'll finish off by just letting you know what work we're doing.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sims. Mr. Schulberg, good evening and welcome. Please.
Thank you, Bill, and thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this will be very quick, just a few items for public awareness as well on this site. So the Chinese Cemetery, it's actually located at 1598 Townsite Road. It's basically located just south of the Nanaimo Regional Hospital off a town site. Many of you may know it from driving by on town site and seeing sort of this gateway structure there. It's it pops out at you when you drive by. I just thought I would start the presentation with these photos I took a few years ago, and just to sort of give you it's an interesting site. It has it's actually a beautiful site. It's quite a tranquil site. You go to the site this particular day, the lighting was just right, and I took some shots of the site itself, but also of the beautiful views that actually you have across the Harewood Valley and then to the mountains beyond. I'd highly recommend, if you do want to go to a place just for some tranquility to visit a site in Nanaimo, this is a good one actually, to go up there and just sit there and look out from it. It's just has I guess a beautiful karma about it. With regard to heritage value and history, the site is listed on the city's heritage register as a cultural landscape. And it is a rare tangible link with Nanaimo's Chinese heritage here in Nanaimo. It is actually the second cemetery site that was created for the Chinese community of the day. It basically took over as a cemetery from the Guard Memorial to Chinese Pioneers site, which is over on Stewart Avenue, which is also listed on the City Heritage Register. And between those two sites and there's two buildings, the old Brumpton Block, which many of you know as the Rendezvous Restaurants building, and also what's the other one? The Modern Cafe, which used to be for many decades a Chinese-Canadian diner. Those two buildings and these two sites are actually what's listed on this current Heritage Register of significance, and it's definitely a tangible connection with the history of the Chinese settlement and Chinese community here in Nanaimo. In this particular case, back on town site, the cemetery was built on land acquired by the Chinese community in the 1920s. I believe it was from the Vancouver Island Coal Company or some version of that, which is where most of this land is ultimately acquired from in those days, with the first recorded burials taking place in 1933. There may have been earlier burials, but these are the ones that we have recorded and have records of. Ownership of this cemetery site was transferred to the City of Nanaimo in 1985 with the approval of the Nanaimo Chinese Memorial Society. So it is currently owned by the city and managed and maintained and operated by the city. The cemetery does feature traditional Chinese cultural elements, including an ornate, highly painted entry gate, viewable from town site, and also an altar and shrine structure, or what we call a pagoda structure. Although the cemetery is no longer exclusively Chinese, it retains a distinct Chinese character, and in fact it's still active. There are currently burials that occasionally happen there as well, and it's still active in that regard. And then the cemetery's striking entrance gate and its location on the main thoroughfare of Townsite Road make it a highly visible neighborhood landmark. These are just some quick images of what we're looking at today, the two structures and the key structures in question. Of course, the entry gate, these are just shots from town site and then looking from the backside onto town site. You'll notice the condition of the structure definitely has some weathering and wear and tear, so that's part of why we're here tonight with you as well, to talk about how that repair work will occur, what sort of repair work will occur, which Bill will be talking about. And then this is the altar and shrine structures, which are basically at the top of the hillside. And there is this smaller sculptural structure that's there as well. And I think at this point, I'll pass it back to Bill.
Thank you very much, Mr. Schulberg. Mr. Sims?
Thanks, Mr. Schulberg. Appreciate it. Yes, so just as Mr. Schulberg mentioned, you can see even in this picture that some of the damage due to weathering of the old concrete. These structures are largely concrete, and there's some deteriorated timber underneath the tiles that's causing some of the loosening. The structural engineer calls it coating failure, which is really the paint. So the paint actually protects the concrete, but over time, concrete can weather and deteriorate. And as the paint fails, it allows further, faster weathering as well. So this was a routine inspection that revealed some of these issues, and it presented a safety hazard, and that's really the driver for the project. So you can see some of the loose concrete here on the underside of the gateway. So the essential work is going to be just stripping the coating, sandblasting it off, hammering at the concrete to get rid of some of the loose stuff, and looking for and replacing any exposed reinforcing steel, patching concrete, and then repainting it all, and replacing the roof tiles and so on. So just a snapshot out of the structural engineering report, and that's really about it. I just thought just an opportunity to provide a little bit of color on one of the projects that the city's working on. Be happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sims. Mr. Schulberg, in order, Councillors Thorpe and Martman, please.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Through you, if I may, to Mr. Sims and Mr. Schulberg, thank you very much. I'm sure there's a fair number of residents, especially newer residents to our city, that have no idea that this place exists, and it's certainly worth a visit. So I'm really pleased to see that we're paying it some attention. And I guess my personal view is that I sort of feel that we maybe haven't done enough to recognize the contributions of the Chinese people to the growth of our city. And we lost a lot of their history with the Chinatown fire, of course. I do have two questions for you. The first one is, as this restoration takes place, could there be an opportunity to also incorporate some improved signage and educational material to explain about the site and the contributions of the Chinese culture? And secondly, and I guess this is more towards Mr. Sims, because I heard him mention that you had talked to several people and sources regarding this project, but I don't think I heard you mention the Chinese Cultural Society. And I just wanted to ask if they have been consulted or had any input. Thank you.
I guess, Bill, I can speak to the first question. Yes. So interpretive signage, believe me, the same thought occurred to us when we were the last few months working on this project. Was here's an opportunity to do probably interpretive signage both at the front gateway entrance, particularly for folks walking by or passing on the street, but also do maybe a more in-depth cultural or cultural interpretation up at the actual altar shrine location. So we kind of see a two-part process of two different signage giving information on the importances of both the gateway and the altar shrine features. I think it's something we'll be discussing as part of the budget, or an additional budget that will need to be found to do that. But that's certainly something we do want to explore as part of this project.
Good, thank you.
And the other, your second question, Councillor Thorpe, is mostly Dr. Lim recommended a number of people with connections to either family that were buried in the cemetery or with the old Chinatown. So we did not, I believe, I think there are some members that we met with that are part of the Chinese Cultural Society, but we couldn't get in touch with anybody directly as an official representative of the society.
No, I appreciate that. I just would suggest that that society is very much active in town, and perhaps as a courtesy, they should be informed at least of what we have planned. Thank you.
Thank you, we will. Yep.
Councillor Martman.
Hi. Thank you. Through you, a really simple question. Are we responsible for moving the power lines, or does BC Hydro take care of that?
Thanks, Your Worship. We would ask for BC Hydro to do it, but it would be at the city's expense.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you very much. I just want to say that it's somewhat appropriate tonight that this be brought forward to council by way of report. One of the things I didn't mention in the mayor's report, which I had mentioned in the previous anniversary of the number 1 mine disaster, was that those Chinese workers who were killed in the mine, when they listed the names of the dead, were only identified by number. Emphasizing again, as Councillor Thorpe brought up, the significant and lengthy history of the contribution of Canadians of Chinese descent to this community, and the poor treatment. As I've said over and over again, this country has a history and it has a past, and so I'm delighted to hear Councillor Thorpe's suggestion, which staff, as is often the case, we're working on in terms of making this a more identifiable place for the citizens of Nanaimo, for the what I'll call the newcomers, as opposed to those who lay in rest at that cemetery, who have been here for whose ancestors indeed helped populate this community. So thank you very much, gentlemen. Unless there's another question from someone. We have no bylaws. We have no notices of motion. We have no other business. We're going to check for question period. Thanks, Calista. And Mr. Barclay, 12A and 12C, please.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I have a number of questions tonight. I was going to ask last week at the meeting, but at 11 o'clock I gave up. It was too late. I didn't want to prolong it. So my questions tonight relate to the budget and to the SPO, and they are questions relating to process and numbers. So my first question is kind of a big question for council. I'm troubled by the amount of time that is spent by council and staff on budget deliberations. It begins, it's got a big echo. Am I too close? It begins back in November with many meetings, the business plans that are presented by staff over a number of days. And it started back in November, it's 3.4%, and then December jumped to 5.9, January down to 5.1, last month 5.9, this month 6%. It shifts so much, and I wonder if 6 months needs to be spent by council and staff deliberating the budget. You have the constant reports by Ms. Fulla showing changes in this. So my question, has council ever considered shortening the process of deliberation over the budget?
I think I can answer that by saying I doubt very much we have, because candidly it is the most important process arguably in which council engages, which is the securing of revenue to operate the city and deliver the services from a philosophical perspective. In terms of the budget itself and timing, unlike private citizens, the vast majority of whom I think it is safe to say do not budget or engage in a budgetary process, except insofar as they're hoping they get through month, week after week, day after day. Ours is publicly scrutinized, subject to public questions as it is tonight, subject to review by the media and every citizen of Nanaimo. And so I guess if you're suggesting we try and shorten the process, I would just say that it's the most important task we undertake. It needs that scrutiny. I don't know of other municipalities that do it any faster particularly, and some indeed may take longer. But I think it's a process that's worthy of that length of engagement. And keeping in mind, it's not like we're at it day after day after day. It's meetings, finance and audit. It's a number of periods of time in between. Staff is securing information. Council discovering other issues that arise, sometimes infrastructure projects that become important because of perhaps a break. The disaster on Bowen Road a couple of years back wasn't an expected part of the budgetary process, but had to be dealt with. So I guess in response, I don't think we'll be in shortening the process. It would be lovely if we could get it all over quickly, but I don't think that is consistent with the importance of the process. It's rather like wooing someone you really love, Mr. Barclay. It's worth the length of time.
But don't you think that the number of changes that occur from those November and December deliberations until now, you know, we had the downtown security and safety plan that was a lot of money, and that came. So I think it I don't know what the word, it just lessens the importance of those early discussions, and hence my argument, my suggestion that maybe you delay those business plans. Kind of a rhetorical question.
I could give you a rhetorical answer if you'd like, but I think you know what it's going to be.
Okay.
Mr. Rudolph.
Oh.
Your Worship, just another footnote. It's a great comment and question, and there is fluidity to the process, but the staff deliver business plans, to draft business plans to council in the fall, which dictate the work program that's going to ensue for the following year. And also baked into that is the capital program, the capital works program. So it gives us a head start on getting tenders out and those types of things. Because if we wait later in the season, prices go up and there's less ability to actually get projects done. So the early part of this is really getting a clarity on the objectives, the outputs, the goals through the business plans. You're right, there's fluidity to the numbers as they come in. Some of those numbers don't arrive until fairly recently, like the final assessment numbers and that type of thing. So it does create some fluctuation. I share your frustration on that. But basically the business plan has been set. The mention of the draft downtown action plan is a unique circumstance. I think this year there may be other times when things come in late, but it's not unprecedented for things to generate towards the end of a cycle. This was later than we had hoped. We had hoped that that document would have been available earlier in the process. It took longer, but it came to council with the understanding that there would be an opportunity to build that into this year's budget. So instead of putting it ahead into another year, this was the reason that it got brought to council this way. So it's not just about the numbers, it's about the work program and the whole business of running the city. And actually the budget process is a year-round thing. Of course, you'd appreciate that from a city perspective. The staff are working already on next year's budget.
Councillor Armstrong, then Councillor Brown.
I was just going to say, for me too, the reason I like it earlier is that we can see exactly what staff wants, like the needs, the wants, the like to haves. So I can look at that. And then again, I looked when we were looking at the additional 2.5 million. So I went back to look at all the positions that we had approved. Is there any I felt that we could eliminate this year? And in this particular case, I thought no, because they've been waiting for years. Sometimes we have to do that. I know that the big bite was the 4 additional firemen when we first came, the additional police officers. Our city has grown and our numbers haven't kept up. So, but that's one of the reasons I do like the earlier process. It gives us that opportunity to sit back and look as more, as I call them, crises come up and say, okay, maybe I have to go back and revisit that. And secondly, we have to do some of that because we have to have the provisional budget passed, right? I believe by the end of December.
That's our practice, and we don't actually have to have it done that way, but it's beneficial as it is for the points that I mentioned earlier about actually having some certainty about the work program and the budget available. So subsequent to that, or some of the additional information that comes in. So it just provides more certainty from a work plan point of view.
Thank you. So that's just my process. Thanks.
Councillor Brown.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship, and thanks for the question. I think it's a good one. If my history serves me right, the city traditionally did a lot of the budgeting, and it's not uncommon, and Mr. Rudolph probably has got a lot more experience to draw from, where a lot of budgeting occurred in the beginning of the year or moving forward, and I think there's been a big shift in local governments about trying to move it to the fall and get a provisional before December, and I can understand where you're coming from. You know, we start with a provisional number that is generated by staff, and there's a lot of discussion, and in this case there was a fair bit of addition. But at that point, you're relying on a lot of assumptions, and with assumptions come uncertainty. And I think staff do their best to be conservative with those. But from where I'm sitting, I actually think that what Mr. Rudolph indicated, the uncertainty in some of the numbers while you're making assumptions, does give us certainty with respect to work plan. And in my mind, I think this shift is a good one, because the certainty of the work plan to me is more important than the certainty of relatively small deviations in the numbers that you're starting with.
Mr. Barclay, another question.
All right, next question, still on the budget, and Mr. Rudolph mentioned the business plans, and so, and you have those initial business plans that presented over many days back in November. So on tonight's documents from Ms. Fuller, I saw 2 new positions in finance as part of that 6% tax increase. So my question is, were business plans presented for those 2 new positions in finance? Okay, all right, I just missed that. Okay. Additionally, I saw there funding for the crime prevention through environmental design and funding for the creation of a community rules and resources guide. I've seen discussion of the first, but the second is new to me. So it says funding. What exactly is meant by funding? Is there a number attached to that, or will we see the tax increase go up to 6.1% in a week's time? I don't know.
That's a very specific question, the kind of question that's probably better directed to staff who can jump to it unless somebody else has got an answer on the top of their head. Ms. Gurry?
I don't have a specific answer to the heading line that Mr. Barclay is speaking of, but as for the increase in a week from now, no. The legislation has, we have to have the bylaw adopted by May the 15th, so there won't be another additional change from tonight's numbers based on that information that you're asking about next week or before the 15th. So I can say that for sure.
Yeah, it's strange. Funding, is that $1,000, $100,000? What is it that?
I appreciate what you're saying, but Mr. Lindsay may be able to answer. Ms. Mercer's not here anymore.
Yeah, sorry, Worship, I don't have the numbers in front of me. They were included in the budget that was attached to the report, so they are in that entire. They are in that funding envelope that was described and presented by our consultant and council supported.
All right. Shift to systems planning.
Councillor Brown. Sorry. I've turned you. I'll rephrase that. You're off on my screen. Okay. Mr. Barclay.
All right. I'll shift then my questions to the systems planning office. I have some concerns with that, both in terms of the process. It seems very cumbersome, but I'll trust that you put in council and the consultants and everyone else a lot of time and effort and thought into that. It's $500,000 a year. That's a 0.5% tax increase. Provincial government spending, they are touting that they're increasing spending on housing, on homelessness prevention by $633 million. So I question whether municipalities need to spend additionally. So
just to be clear, and you're getting more into a speech than a question, okay. The money is not to build housing per se, and I appreciate that the $600 million the province has announced, but when you consider the cost of construction, we're talking several thousand units across a province of nearly 5 million people. It is I would argue, and I suspect council will agree, is a pretty insubstantial amount in comparison to the need, indeed the desperation that we're seeing. If we can secure, I will call it a disproportionate, but only because we have suffered for so long, a disproportionate share of provincial funding because we have done groundwork and saved the province time and shows that it can be successful, I think it's fair to say that this is money very well spent.
Okay. I'm hopeful on that. And this money, so the $480,000, now perhaps I missed an earlier meeting where it was discussed. What exactly is that? It's to pay for an executive director and some honorariums, I understand. How exactly will that nearly $500,000 be spent?
In order, Councillors Bonner and Hemmons.
Thank you, Worship. That particular amount of money will be spent to set up the organization, rental, holding meetings, paying staff. and then doing the work that we wanted to do in terms of coordinating the work that we're doing on the ground to collect the data, work with the agencies, work with funders, so that we can make the best possible situation of a bad situation. And so that we can advocate to the province with real numbers and real reasons of why we need the housing and we need the resources here, not just housing, but resources here, so that we can get things that we need so that the people who are on the street and the people who are facing evictions or facing housing loss or facing health issues get the supports they need, and so that our citizens can live in a better place. So that's what the money's for. It's not for building anything, and it's not so much that it's flexible. It's just that there's a whole bunch of things that we're going to be doing, and that money is there as a basic thing. If you look into the health, and if you look in the SBO as well, it is also looking to find its own funding. So it's, part of its job will be is to go out and work with funders and coordinate some of that, so that we're bringing more money in for these things as well.
And Councillor Armstrong. Thank you, Councillor Bonner.
I'm just going to add, if you want more information, if you go to the Ontario Alliance to End Homelessness, they've been doing this for years. Like, we actually did what the SBO was done back in the 90s. It's just that there wasn't a name for it, and it was done off the side of your desk. So now it's going to be a coordinated approach, and hopefully everybody will be at the table.
No, I understand that. You know, if I were to go to the bank and say I want to borrow $480,000, they want to know a budget. How do I plan to spend that money? You know, so is the city going to spend $250,000 a year on an executive director? I don't know. Where is the budget? I know, again, I'm exaggerating, but where are these numbers?
I hope you are exaggerating. I saw Mr. Corson's eyebrows go up and realized he'd be applying for the position from his current...
Be about 150.
Councillor Armstrong.
I just wanted to add to your previous question, I did find the numbers. For the SEPTED, it was $25,000, and for the resource guide, it was $20,000.
Okay, next, getting near the end. Now this question, I don't know if anyone can answer. I'd just like to follow up on consultants. So over the process of nearly a year, I imagine consultants were involved in this. What was the name of the consultants that were involved in this?
Mr. Corson.
Yeah, through your worship. So we started off with Catherine Rockendale and Associates. So she helped us last spring and early summer. And Dina K. Benno has been helping us as kind of a staff support person. So she's a consultant, but she provides capacity to myself to help move these things along. Yep. Most of the work was actually done by the transition team themselves. So this was very much an iterative process where we sat around the table, and if you read the document, it is a bit of a, what do they say, a camel is a horse designed by committee or something like that. So, you know, it's not as probably as smooth as some of the documents you see from consultants, because it really reflects that, you know, Councillor Bonner's comments are in there, Councillor Hammond's comments are in there, comments from CMHA are in there. So it's, it was really much a team effort to put that together.
Okay. Councillor Bonner?
Oh, no, you answered it perfectly. Thank you.
Right. Thank you.
And last question. So again, council's front loading and rear loading with consultants. I see at the end of 4 years, consultants will be employed once again to review the organization. So my question is, why the 4 year? Will there be a review done by staff perhaps after 2 years? I'm assuming that there will be some oversight.
Councillor Bonner, did you?
Thank you, Worship. I'm sure Mr. Corson can probably explain it better than I can, but from my understanding as your representative, this will be a yearly thing, right? The idea at the 4 year mark is to look at all the things that the SBO has done. Where has it been? Is it something we need to continue? Do we need to continue funding it, or has it already found enough money it needs to carry on? Those types of questions, which will be a more larger than just a yearly reports to us. In addition to that, members from the city will be on this thing and be able to report back as well. So we're going to keep a really close eye on it. And I can tell you right now, all the members of the community that I talk to want to make sure that this thing is successful. So they'll be keeping an eye on it too.
Very good, thank you. Seconded, Councillor Hemmons. All those in favor? Any opposed? Thank you very much, everyone. Appreciate it as always. We are adjourned.